Yo! Welcome back to Semen Retention. To all the new subscribers, quite a few new subscribers just over the last couple of days. Thank you for checking out my other video, which is called Time Flies and Timelines Semen Retention. We're going to dabble a little bit further into that concept, but from a different angle. And basically what I want to talk about is the direct competition of thyself and God. Okay, now this is kind of expanding into the dimensions of self-concept, shifting timelines and all that kind of stuff as well. All very interesting things. What I've done here is, again, I've got the 7 chakras laid out in sequence. We go from the root chakra all the way up to the crown chakra. And again, this relates to semen retention. Just to reiterate, the Kundalini rises up, and as a process of awakening, as a process of becoming our highest self, we have to eliminate versions of ourselves. And this is the thing is that it's like a competition. There's the ego of the lower self that's like, no, hang on a second. I don't want you to like let this kind of go ahead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit down a little bit lower, and we're going to start here in the lower region. So what I want to say is that the soul has different dimensions and variations, yeah? So we're going to start off here in the lowest variation of ourself. And you'll notice that even though there's 7 points in the chakras, I've kind of dwindled it down to 6 points, because those are the meeting points in between the 7 chakras, okay? So in between the root and the sacral chakra. So the root is like the survival, and the sacral is the creative sexual energy, right? I have the version of me sitting here, which I call the worker/student. Now this is the version of me when I was probably about 15 years old through to 20 years old, 19 years old. So for a solid 4 years of my life, I was inhabiting that dimension of myself. I think it's important. Everyone needs to develop that sense of work. I mean, we live in a 3-dimensional reality that is physical, and we are governed by like a matrix and, governments that enforce the fiat currency that we call money. Now, it's important to understand the game that we're playing in, and not to try and, contest the game too much when you don't actually have any power at this stage. So what you do is you start off as a worker and a student. And I don't say or a student, because what's the point in trying to do this game of ascension if you're not willing to learn? What's the point of doing this game of ascension if you're not willing to work? You need to be both a worker and a student, okay? So this is also got an aspect, not just in relation to doing work and study, it's also got an aspect of, things like I was eating a lot of food then. I wasn't necessarily overweight. Sometimes I was overweight. Sometimes I was maybe even underweight when I was young. But what I did learn is that there was the compulsion going on there. And the compulsion was like an inability to be present with the emotions that I was feeling, and understand that some of the difficulties that I was having was actually of a result of either, past life or present life kind of traumas that have been imposed onto me, whether that be by strangers, relationships, family members, etc., environmental factors, political, societal factors. All those things played a part in the survival mode. And then that also transcended into the sacral chakra as well, which is when I started to dabble with lust and all the other things that come with that. Being influenced by the friend that shows you those sites when you're young, or, your brother shows you something. Maybe you even catch your relatives doing something and you're like, oh, what the hell? Like that kind of thing is where the sacral chakra comes in. And whilst you're inhabiting this body of worker slash student, you are practically an NPC. You don't really have a say in things. You don't have an influence on things. You're programmed, you watch the professional sports and you think it means something when it really doesn't, and it's all scripted. You watch all your celebrities and you think that they're inspirational heroes and they're standing up for things. And that's before you realize that they're all just kind of puppets and, pawns for the elites to kind of push certain agendas onto the masses. So when you're in this area, you're kind of like an NPC, worker, student, and also you're susceptible to a lot of just in general brain washing. Like when I went to university, I remember being really excited to go to university and dive deep into music industry topics. I did a Bachelor of Arts in Music Industry at RMIT in Melbourne, but essentially that whole course, the Bachelor of Arts Music Industry course at RMIT in Melbourne, was essentially an indoctrination in creating a certain type of music industry person that would furthermore push these political, societal type of beliefs rather than focusing things such as merit, practicality within the music industry, getting gigs, getting, upskilling and all that kind of stuff. They were more concerned about, political factors of the music industry and, in a way, actually creating political factors within the music industry. So by the age of 20, 21, that's when I started ascending. I was like saying to myself, you know what? School is a load of shite. And that's when the student became the teacher. And alongside, we ascend. So the student became the teacher. The worker, the guy that used to do the part-time work at the restaurant, at the cafe, the casual job at the charcoal chicken shop, the guy that used to basically, run around doing umpiring for footy games, he started to become a teacher. He started to see that he had already enough wealth of knowledge to pass on to younger generations. And that is when I decided at the age of 19 to become a teacher and teach kids how to learn, how to play music, guitar and piano, how to use their ear and all that kind of stuff. That is also when, even though I had my own projects in music that I was leading, I also started to have a bit more success as a backing musician. Okay, this is important to make that distinguish. I was, because I was very skilled and still am very skilled at piano, it was a very in-demand instrument. So in the music industry, you have in-demand instruments like drums, bass, and keys are often very sought for. Guitarists, everyone's a guitarist these days. Singers, everyone thinks they can sing. So I became a backing musician for probably about 6 bands, and I had my own band. This was all fun and games until I started to realize that I was kind of being loosed. My energy, my creativity, my innate talents were actually just being harvested by lower beings. And the reason why is because from an energetic level, I was always residing in the higher realms. But when I started to play the game and really trying to play the game of money and, status and power and all that kind of stuff, all this lower dimensional kind of stuff, which you have to establish the lower parts of yourself. They're the roots that tie you to the earth, I started to kind of become a backing musician, and I started to lose my voice, not only just metaphorically, but also physically as well. I had plenty of opportunities as a singer when I was about 17, 18 years old, but then from the age of 18 through to about, I'd say even 24, 25, I started to lose my actual voice. So this realm of sacral meets solar plexus you might get your girlfriend, you might get you might get into dating, you might get into, just really lusting, trying to be in kind of dynamics where you feel like you're in power. Maybe you're in a band that you feel like is it's sexy or something like that. The people that are in the band are sexy and you're going to have attention and all that kind of stuff. That's always going to be an illusion. But especially when you're like located in this lower dimension, you kind of are falling for all those ideas. You haven't really attained that higher awareness of understanding that things that are sexy are multidimensional and are very, very personal and individual based. So this is the point where you start to really obsess over things like getting paid and all that kind of stuff. So that's when I started ascending a bit more, and I kind of got out of that that backing musician era. And by the time that I was in probably like my mid-20s, that's when I started to step into the musician/producer role. So I was starting to make more money as a producer, producing other artists, and being a musician, being just a singer, guitarist that, was basically just singing and playing guitar and earning money that way. Now, at the same time, I still had competition, and the competition was against myself. So this higher version of myself had to compete against the teacher/backing musician. It also had to compete against the fragmented, remnants of the worker/student version of myself. So the musician/producer version of myself, he understood that not only could I make money, but I could also tap into that heart space as well. I could tap into that heart chakra space where I could just make money doing things that I enjoy. I could make money having fun. I didn't have to work at the cafe. I didn't have to work as the umpire. I didn't have to work for the other company teaching people. So then that's when that tie finally, eventually, it finally severed off. So I had basically transcended that lower realm. I still had ties to the lower frequency of the teacher/backing musician, and they stuck around until I went higher again. So then I started to get into, I guess you could say, YouTuber/healer. Now, YouTuber is a bit more recent in terms of things like, in terms of things like Semen retention is only a product of this year. However, in the past, I have had channels where I have tried to give musicians advice, and I still am going to work up getting back to that channel as well. I think it will be a good auxiliary channel to Semen retention, because a lot of you guys are actually artists and musicians yourself, and I think it'd be good to give you some insight from myself. So I got into this space where I realized I could operate from the heart space and also be expressive. Now, this meant that I had to be honest with myself. So when you're in this self, this higher level of self, you've crossed over the meeting point where things are just based upon kind of flesh, money, and survival needs, right? So you get into this honesty, kind of authenticity area of the heart and the throat, which means speaking your truth and living your truth and, feeling things from a true, point. And so the healing aspect also tied into the producing, and it also tied into the music. So the healing aspect of the musician was to play the gigs, but play light music, play music that made people feel good. And as a result of that not only made other people feel good, it also made me transcend my mood depending on what it was during the day, because I was going through a lot of different things at that time. I'd come out of a long-term relationship, just started seeing someone as well, and I was kind of dabbling in some of the marijuana kind of stuff, and vaping, and that also affects the heart space. So we'll get into that in a sec. So I'll draw this here as like a little virus. That's a little virus. So what happened was I started to heal with my music, and then I started to heal with my producing. So with my producing other artists, I was using my expressive voice, my way of commanding other people as artists. Do another take. I know you can do it. Oh man, that sounded so awesome. How about this time? Can we try like you just using your voice like really soft, and like just imagine like whispering in someone's ear, and like you're using your voice to heal as a producer. And what you're doing is you're being a mouthpiece for other people to climb up different levels. So maybe someone's stuck in here in this sacral area where they're just very, they kind of got that Kuma kind of energy, and they need to tap into that innate power. And then they need to tap into that heart space to get that really good take so that you feel the emotion in the singing. And that's what higher awakened people can do, is they can heal through these roles, whether it be a musician or a producer, or it could be any role. Trust me, this doesn't just apply to my life. So it can be through any role that allows people to climb up this spectrum. Yeah. Okay. So with that being said, at that time, I was still infecting myself with the marijuana and the vaping and the nicotine and cigarettes or whatever that were involved, and my heart wasn't fully opened. So I still was doing positive things, but it wasn't as effective as it could be. That's when I decided to ascend once again. All right, so now when I got into like semen retention properly, I decided to completely stop with the vaping, stop with the marijuana, stop with just low frequencies in general. And as a result, naturally, biologically, my lungs, my heart space started to heal. So that virus of, toxins and stuff had gone. I'd cleared that out. Now, this is when Semen retention really started to come into play. Okay, so in this higher realm of throat chakra and third eye region, I have listed the artist, songwriter / Mars in Leo. So Mars in Leo is my artist name. That's what I perform all my original music under, Mars in Leo. Now, Mars in Leo was one of those third eye kind of moments where I just had a really crazy week of synchronicities and kind of shifting things. It all happened within like a week. A lot of crazy things happened, and then the name Mars in Leo just came out of nowhere, and I was like, that's it. That is that is me. And then that's kind of what really solidified this artist-songwriter archetype that has been waiting to emerge. Waiting to kind of really have its time to shine. And the reason why it was taking so long for it to happen is because even though this was, given glimpses, this artist-songwriter has always had glimpses and opportunities in the past, it never could ascend to and habituate, it couldn't like settle and like put its roots and foundations in here and just stay at this level, because the lower chakras hadn't been properly ascended, hadn't been realized. I hadn't figured out my work. I hadn't learned enough. I hadn't learned how to be in a teacher's position, in a position of leadership. I hadn't learned how to transcend being a backing musician. I hadn't learned how to really put myself out there as a leading musician, as a front man. I, hadn't learned how to have a good work ethic as a musician, as a producer. I hadn't learned how to express myself from the heart space and try and heal people with my words and with my performance, which is channeled through things such as Semen retention, because despite this just being a video, this is also a performance, and it is truthful, and it's coming from the heart space, and I'm also getting a little bit of insight from the third eye. And I also hadn't really adopted the fact that I was a healer. I hadn't realized that even despite having signs of when I was like 18 years old, 17 years old, of people having emotional reactions and positive kind of reactions to my performance as a musician, I didn't realize that that was something that I should actually take seriously. I didn't realize that that was a gift that was, required for society. I just thought it was just music. I was coming from a real egoic kind of place where I was like, oh, nah, but, I want to be famous type shit. So when I transcended all that bullshit, I got into this territory. And this is when all the dreams started to occur, all the crazy insights, all the the lessons learned, all the songs, lyrics started to have like multi-dimensionality to it. It started to have more complexity, yet be performed in a more simplistic manner. So, for example, having only maybe like 3 instruments in a mix, but the lyrics are just so potent and so vivid and evoke so many emotions and feelings and ideas and expressions and different vibrations and frequencies in the form of modulation the voice. So like I could change my voice like that, or I could go low, I could do all these little modulations and really tap into that. I call it like the alien frequency. So like the third eye is kind of like this alien frequency, which takes us out of the human body, and we're tapping into that spirit kind of, alien type stuff. So, lastly, the superconscious. Okay, I'm going to stand up for this. I'm not here. I'm not here yet. I don't know if I'm ever going to be here. I'm not even here yet. I'd say my range is about here. That's my range. So what I had to do is I had to continue to dissociate from these lower versions of myself. The lessons were learned. The times were had. But each version of myself had to be let go of as I became lighter, as my frequency became higher. My last week of teaching, even though I felt joy, I still felt the heaviness of that sacral chakra space, because I felt just the energy of the room that I was in, the parents that I was dealing with, the kids that I was dealing with. They're just not on my level. They're just not on my level. The girl whose band I quit last year, I gave her a message saying, look, it was fun. No longer doing this kind of stuff, going to focus my own thing. It's like, just had to do it. You have to make tough decisions. As a producer, there's a guy that I've been producing for nearly 10 years now. He's going to get the axe. I've done my favors for him. I've produced his music. That's all fun and games, mate. Hope you've enjoyed the experience. But I got to keep going. So then the next area of which I want to inhabit, and which I will be this area. And that's really cool, is that I'm going to be, once I've established my YouTube/healing karma, and I've dealt with all that kind of energy that I needed to deal with, I'm going to be stepping into the full artist, songwriter, Mars in Leo self. And that's not to say I can't go down onto YouTube and do my Semen retention and do my healing and all that kind of stuff. It's not to say I can't go down and play that pub gig and earn a few $100s, you know, that way, or do a little bit of production work just for a bit of cash. No, that's not the case. That's not saying I can't go really down and be a teacher or a backing musician if I really need some money, you know. It's not saying I can't go all the way down and go back to TAFE and learn how to do, you know, learn how to do electrician, you know, become an electrician or something like that because I'm desperate to have money, you know. That's to say all these things would have to fall apart for that to happen. It's very interesting stuff. Okay, stick around 1 second. So in conclusion, we have these different versions of ourselves. You know, some of you might be just starting to get your feet on the ground. You know, you're starting to rise that Kundalini energy. You're going to have the version, you know, the version of Stephen that is at home, feels very much in his heart space, in his expressive state, and in his third eye frequency of imagination. You know, reading books, just having a little garden and think around things, or going for a run and just think about things and imagine things. That Stephen, you know, who has the vision of transforming his kingdom and, you know, putting guitars on the wall and adding little effects to his room to make it sound good and look good. That's just different versions of himself, you know. You don't have to kill the lower versions of yourself, but just understand that the more you kind of raise yourself up and practice these things such as semen retention, it's going to be just a natural process of requiring to let go of that baggage. You know, you used to go on the airplane and you used to pay extra money. You used to have to pay fees to take all the luggage that you wanted to take, because you had to take that pair of clothes and you had to take that jumper and you had to take those pair of shoes and you had to do this and that and this and that and this and that. But then you became more conscious. Then you became more lighter, not only physically, but also with your material outlook on the world. You became lighter. You're like, you know what? I'm just going to take a backpack, my phone, a book, and then I'm going to go to an op shop when I get there, go buy some clothes for about $20, and then I'm just going to leave them at the op shop, because not only do I save money not, you know, paying extra for carry-on baggage and all that sort of stuff, I'm packing light. I can move around quickly. I can get to my destinations without worrying about the backpack or whatever, or the suitcase, and dragging it along the ground and lifting it up on the bus. It's like, no, I've just got a backpack on and I'm running through life. That's what it's like when you're ascending on semen retention and Kundalini and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to leave this video at that. I've got another 2 parts which we will get into very soon. The second part is going to be you know, how we are in direct competition with fragmented aspects of our supreme being, our soulmates, karmic relationships, our family binds and bonds, and we have lessons to learn and need these fragmented, imperfect beings to help us to remove the ego and transcend into purity and divine consciousness. So that will be the next episode, when we talk about how, as you ascend through these different levels, you're going to have an outwards effect within your karma and the relationships and your external world. And then as a final kind of episode to this series, we're going to talk about the concept of the twin flame, which is going to be talking about that direct, you know, that direct connection that we have to that significant other version of ourselves. So hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a like, give it a subscribe, give it a comment, and I'll see you on the next one. Let's go.